Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Good Chair Discussions, a college chaplain's view from the foot of an ivory tower. I'm so glad you have joined us again today. This is Corona Ethics Part 2, and a lot of what's going on in the nation has to do with the not just the racial tensions, but the racial violence that's been happening with three back-to-back killings of unarmed Black people, as well as the subsequent riots that are happening. And when I first invited Giuliana to come on this podcast, I was originally thinking, because she's been very proactive and thinking through just some of the ethics surrounding the pandemic and corona ethics, and we get to that, but I will say that the majority of the show is actually us talking about the current situation with America and the racial healing that needs to take place. And we talk about it both just as people, but then we also talk about it as Christians. I think if you don't know Giuliana, I think you're gonna really like her by the end of this. She speaks her mind, she speaks from the heart. I love her straightforwardness, and knowing her as long as I have, she has a real tender and gracious heart for people around her, people that are different from her, and is really put her money where her mouth is when it comes to the justice advocacy that she's involved in. I think you're going to love her. You're going to love this conversation. I just encourage you to keep an open mind, and I hope that you learn something, because for me, this process through understanding racism has been a long and oftentimes difficult journey as a white woman looking to understand this really troubling history and reality in our country. But again, I know most of the people who listen to this and who I love are anti-racist, but we still have a lot to learn about what that actually means to do that. And there's a lot of subtle things that creep in as white people that we need to just confront and address, because God has called us and empowered us to do that. So here's my conversation with Giuliana. Thanks for coming and joining us. You can have the good chair. Well, good morning, Giuliana.
Hey.
I'm so excited to be here with you. Now, I was trying to calculate this out earlier. I think we've known each other this might be almost 6 years that we're
Yeah.
going on. I remember, I don't know how much of this you've got stored up. I was recalling as a freshman, when I first met you, you approached me about putting together a program of like discussing faith and service.
Yes.
And we did like a 3-part thing for the Bonner program. Bonner Love, little shout out.
Yay.
And you were just a freshman back then, and I just remember thinking, yes,
Yeah.
girl, let's do this. Do you remember that? That feels like forever ago.
Yeah, and I remember being really nervous because it was my first time like leading a meeting, and there was seniors in there, and I was like, I don't know anything, so I don't know what I'm going to teach you, but let's read this.
Yes, it was so great. It was so great. And then later on, you were a part of that small group discussion group that used to meet in my house, where we talked about Christianity and social justice.
Yes.
So we've been having this conversation for like a long time
Yeah.
ongoing.
Yeah,
So
no.
so I'm excited to let viewers, listeners, whoever, in on what is just sort of our ongoing conversation, because you've been a vocal advocate, not just for the rights of several people, but even specifically like immigrant and refugee policy reform. You worked with a nonprofit group that worked with refugees, and you are taken steps working towards law school. Is that correct?
Yes, all correct. Yeah, so I remember like in college was really when that awakening happened, because nobody in my really prior to that in my life had talked about Jesus as somebody who worked for social justice, which is crazy to think about because I went to a Hispanic church, and like a lot of people there faced racial injustice and just discrimination in general. Um, and so it was interesting when that idea was presented to me, and it was like really easy to consume everything that I could learn about it, because it was like, yeah, like Jesus fled and he, like when he was a baby, like they were fleeing, and he stood up for people that like were marginalized. And so it was like something that really fired me up, and I was like, I want to learn more. And even not just in my faith, but in other faiths, because faith drives a lot of people. So yeah, and I got to work with refugees, which was really interesting, because even in that circle, you see a lot of like, you see a lot of discrimination against undocumented people in refugee circles, which is crazy too. It's like so layered, because they're like, well, I'm legal because I'm a refugee, and they're not because they're undocumented. And so and it's crazy because you can fight for all of these things and still within those communities, like be at a point of tension. And so that's something that I'm learning still, because it's like we can agree on some things but not on everything, and that's, we can still work together and we can have a common goal. But I really did enjoy that. I learned a lot. And yeah.
Oh yeah, I love that. I'm so glad you shared that. I think that the complexities of these issues are one of the things that keep us a lot of times from engaging in conversation. So, but I love getting into the complexities. I know you love getting into complexities. It's like, all
Yes.
right, let's get in there and let's like unpack this. So I've always appreciated that the way you approach those things. But before because we're going to circle back to the social justice stuff, because we've got so much to talk about, but I want to take a moment first because you have been very active on social media, not just for justice issues, but okay, so even before the quarantine, but definitely during the quarantine,
Yes.
you have this dedication to holistic health, good living, pro body image. Like, I mean, I see workouts and yoga and cooking and baking. Oh,
Yes.
it makes me want to come over to your house like every day for dinner. I'm like, forget the quarantine. I'm going over there. Um, let's talk a little bit about that, because I love it. I absolutely love it. What prompted this for you?
Yeah, so first of all, I follow a ton of like what we call influencers now, on Instagram, and it's just so fun to me that their life, like first of all, how much power they hold, because I think before in marketing and advertising, it used to be like if you got a celebrity to endorse you, that was like the top tier, like you've got sales. But now it's like these influencers have kind of like come into the market, and they share their lives with you, so you trust them. And then when they're like, I use this product, this is not an ad, you're like, oh, so it's probably a good product. Or when it is an ad. And so I've always loved that. And I think social media for me is tricky sometimes, because I'm like, what's the purpose of social media, is it I find myself taking breaks sometimes, because if I'm like sharing a story and I'm like, I'm doing this because I want people to think my life is better. And so I really try to check myself there, because I never want that to be the intention. I want it to be like, it sounds cheesy, but like inspirational, and like she's doing this so I can too. And so it really all started when I started following people that looked like me, both like my color and like my body type, because it was like I realized that the only people I followed on Instagram as far as influencers went were white and very skinny people. And they're really great and I still follow them, but I started to realize that it wasn't healthy for me to consume this, because it was almost like an obsession of like, how can I get my life to look like that? And surprise, I cannot change either my complexion or now my body size. Like there's just certain body types that I will never look like that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I started to think like, if I start sharing more about myself, and that idea of vulnerability, which is so scary on social media, because I find myself sometimes being vulnerable and somebody responds that I'm like, I totally forgot they followed me. And I'm like, they know all of this. And then I kind of go into this whole like, oh my gosh, so many people saw this. But most of the time it is really positive feedback. And that's really what keeps me going. And so that sounds, again, cheesy, but it's like, this is helping a few people. And I'm thankful for that. And so I love to share like me doing a workout, because one, again, you don't see a lot of body types, like you don't see a diverse body type doing certain workouts. You only see one very like what looks to be a fit person. And I'm like, anyone can do this. Like I follow Lizzo on Instagram and TikTok, and she posts her workouts, and it's like really awesome to see that body type doing workouts, because it's like, hi, surprise, your idea of health, like the general population's idea of health, isn't what is represented here. And so,
Yeah.
so yeah, so that's kind of where that comes from. And like right now, I think it's just fun to be like, hey, this is what I'm doing with my time, and this is what's going on. And it's, I think it is scary to be vulnerable at times, but I just hope if it helps at least two people, that's my goal. So maybe
I
just one, but
I love that. I love that. And I think you raised such a good point because yeah, I feel like and I don't know if I've ever articulated this before, but one of the most frustrating things I think sometimes I feel about watching workout videos or using apps or different things like that is that a lot of times the people that I'm trying to imitate to do the workouts are all really fit.
yeah,
They're like super fit. And I'm like, I like in one sense, I'm like, oh, well, it's a, it's a workout thing. Obviously they're fit, they're doing this, but there's also this feeling there's that weird sort of cognitive dissonance that sort of weighs on you as you're doing it. Um, and I never really thought about articulating that before, but you do that perfectly where it's like,
oh, thank
how
you.
empowering would it be to be working out alongside or to glean information about workouts from people of all different body types because then you kind of feel like you're in your niche and saying like,
Yeah,
okay, this is how I am. I'm getting healthy for me, and other people like me are doing that too. So
yeah.
so I love that. But I also just like the courage you have to bake on like in a public forum. Like, well, okay, true confessions here. Like I am if I were to put my cooking misadventures on video or Instagram, I think I would have people unfollowing me. I think I would have like fewer followers
Yeah.
because it is always such it's either a disaster or near disaster, or it's like, here's my cold cereal. See you peeps later. Like it's just sad and awful. So I'm always just like, oh my gosh, look at she's showing like this whole process, this before, this after. Like it actually turned out like she thought, and of course you show some of the ones that you're like, this didn't turn out either. But like
Yeah.
but so many successes, I will say. So yeah, it's like layers of courage, Giuliana, layers of
Yeah.
courage
Yeah,
going
it
in.
doesn't feel that way sometimes, but yeah, I think, and I think also we become so I don't know if the right word is sanitized, but just used to seeing like perfect images on social media, which is,
Yeah.
I've heard this talked about countless times, like the social media isn't what you see, like isn't real life and things like that. But it's like, I get that, but show us real life then. And so it's like, I want people to normalize normalcy. I guess that's the that's the word. And I'm like, it really doesn't make sense to and again, I go back and forth because I'm like, I want a private life, and then I'm like, no, I want everybody to know everything about me. And so there's always that balance. And I think as humans we're allowed to feel either way, and we can go back and forth, and that's the fluidity of all of this. So I enjoy it, and I want people to see failure because I want to normalize that, because I don't see failure all the time, and I hate failing because of that. And so it's like, if that's like a small way to show people, or it's like, I've been practicing doing like a handstand on social media, like, not like, I haven't posted about it yet, but it's kind of a hot mess, and it just doesn't look good. And I'm like, I'm recording my progress. So I mean, if I never end up doing a handstand, it's fine, but at least I'm trying. And so it's like, I want people to see that, because it's like, you don't just wake up and do a handstand. You like slowly work to get there. And that applies to so many things in life. You don't just wake up a professor. You are a student first. So getting deep here.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, I remember, gosh, I think this was years ago. So I was probably still young-ish in the sense that I was probably I think I was in like my mid to late 20s when this happened, but we were visiting friends in another city and my friend invited me to go to a yoga class with her. And I remember I just started getting into yoga, really started enjoying it. And so we went, but the teacher was a little bit more advanced than my version of yoga, but like I wanted to impress. Like I didn't want, to look like the stupid uncoordinated newbie in the class. And she had us do this handstand. Um, and I was like, even my friend was like, I'm not doing it. I'm opting out. But I was like, I'm doing this. I'm totally doing this. And it was a big mistake.
Uh-oh.
Such a mistake. And I did like something in my back and I couldn't do anything the rest of the class. It was just,
No.
it's like still such a point of shame where I was just like, see, what are you doing? Your ego is stupid. What are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? But I look forward to the handstand progression for
Okay.
sure. Oh gosh, yeah, I absolutely love that. I really see that social media is in this new era, um, where we have the like. I love what you said about like making normal again. You
Yeah.
know, it really is. What a phenomenal thing. When it made me think of when I was first entering college many years ago. But when I was first entering college, I remember I was really looking forward to college because it was clean slate for me. I could start over. I could reinvent, be the person I wanted to be without, sometimes it's just hard in your hometown to like break out of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so I had just started journaling. Now I'm not a big journaler, but for some reason in college was probably the peak of my like active journaling. I would journal every couple of days. And I remember in an effort to really push myself into being authentic, I would leave my journal on our coffee table in our dorm room and I would invite people if they wanted to read it or
Oh,
not.
wow.
Totally fine, open to them. But it was like for me, it was a little mortifying, but it was like I wanted to be true and I wanted to know that who I was, all the things were. I didn't want to keep all these secrets to
Yeah.
myself that I had gotten in the habit of for years and years. And so that was my exercise in trying to present some sort of messy authenticity.
Yeah.
And I did that all 4 years of college. And I mean, some people read it, a lot of people didn't. For some people, they were just like, no, that's weird, dude. I don't want to read your journal. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that's fine. But it was a way for me to, as I'm writing, I was like, you need to be honest, but people might read this, so here we go. And of course we didn't have like social media back then. We were like barely dialing up AOL style at that point in time. But I really feel like that's a powerful discipline.
Yeah, it is. I think, and you touch on like a really good point because it's like, is Instagram a diary or is social media like an open diary? And in a way it is because it's like,
Yeah.
but it is that idea of like you're only showing people what you want them to see. And so I totally I get that. And I think even like I really try to post things on my stories that are helpful resources. Like regarding like issues like social justice issues, but I find myself being frustrated sometimes too because it's like this is only for 24 hours and certain issues like specifically what's going on right now. I'm sorry if I'm jumping too much ahead.
No, perfect
So
segue. Yeah, let's
but
do this.
okay, great. And it's like the issue is longer than 24 hours and stories specifically are 24 hours. And a lot of what's happening right now, obviously it's been happening for a while. Like it's just that it's the idea, it's like the school shooting idea. School shootings happen a lot, which is unfortunate, but it's like you don't remember it until another one happens.
Yeah.
And so it's like you go through that like maybe 1 week, if 2 weeks of like, oh my gosh, this is so sad, this really sucks. And then it's like, okay, back to normal life. And then another school shooting happens. And so and we and I so let me gather my thoughts for a second. So I posted something on social media recently that I did take down, and I regret taking it down. And so this is just me admitting my mistakes.
Yeah.
So I had posted. So a lot of things that I've seen happening the past like few weeks, maybe month now, is that white people respond to my stories with a lot of like not attacks, and it's never like anybody is calling me a mean thing. They're just like, here's why I don't believe this, or here's why I don't agree with this. And I'm like, and I always want to engage in conversation, especially right now, because I don't believe that it is specifically Black people's job to educate people on what's going on. And so, not that I'm some kind of hero or anything, but I'm trying to take that on right now because I want people to be having conversations. And I tend to lean towards the sides of like grace and accountability, but we're not going to get anywhere if we do not work together. And so, and I know that a lot of people don't see it that way, and that's okay, because everybody's justified and they have their reasoning on why, on their, like, it's white people's job to fix it, you have to fix it now, I'm not going to tell you how, you need to figure it out. And I'm like, I get it. Black people are exhausted, like they're dying, and they put themselves out there just to get crap in return. And so I understand why they've developed that, and I want to be somebody that people can come to and say, hey, this is I need some resources, or I want to talk about this. And I want to be honest, I'm not going to lie, it's really exhausting sometimes. Like, I have to take breaks because it's just this energy that it requires to have these conversations and to have them well. But going back to my social media mistakes, so I posted this, and usually when people, anything that starts with "Dear White People," I get some responses, because it's that term of like white fragility, which I actually have it here on my phone, because I'm reading this book. And so in case people aren't familiar with the idea of white fragility, but it's basically like, it's not people of color's like job to make white people feel better about issues of race. And so white fragility is that idea that like white people can't talk about difficult things, specifically regarding race, and they're fragile. And like, it's, so then it forces people of color, specifically Black people, to kind of bend themselves into knots to make a white person feel comfortable so that they can talk about their issues. And so what you get is like watered down, like discussions, or very surface level discussions. And so that's really, so anyway, so going back to the story, sorry, very jumbled here. But and so the story was specifically saying that like hashtags are not enough, like it's time to take action, like this is just not okay anymore, which it never was, obviously, but the post was just trying to get at that. And it's like the idea that like to stop bothering Black people, like stop asking them to like for resources on how to respond to these issues. And I did get a few responses that were like, I feel like she's being unfair. And the influencer, her name is Rachel Cargle, which I highly recommend anyone follow. She's gonna make you uncomfortable. I am a person of color, and I am uncomfortable a lot of the times when she talks about things, because I think one of the first steps in like addressing issues of racial injustice is like the fact that all of us have white supremacy ingrained in us, even Black people. And the thing is, it just manifests differently. So Black people and people of color, when they have that white supremacy ingrained in them, it's that idea that white people are better. And it's the same thing for white people, but they're in the position of power. And so addressing that, I think, is really the first step. And so I forgot where I was going with this, but Rachel Cargle, she talks a lot about that. And I think that was one of the first times that I was uncomfortable, because I was like, I'm brown, like there's no way that I'm racist, like I experienced racism. But then as I started to think about my conversations with people, specifically family members, and it's like a lot of my family can be racist, and that is such a hard thing to come to terms with, because I'm brown and I'm Hispanic and I face racism. My family was undocumented for almost 20 years. So it's like the fact that like, it's like, what room do we have to be racist? But still, it's that hierarchy. That's been a really hard thing to talk about, specifically with my parents, because they're great people, but my dad can be racist, like he just can. And when my grandma came to visit us from Uruguay, like she was like, what, like, oh my gosh, there's so many Black people here, like things like that, which is just like, racism is literally everywhere. And it's like, you can be brown and be racist against Black people. So I think that's been a really big challenge for me, and also like the idea that we take like that, again, going back to that in like cultural history, pop culture history, like you see like I remember Gina Rodriguez, so she was in Jane the Virgin, and I disagreed with her when she said this. So Black Panther won a lot of awards, and she said like, congrats to Black Panther, but when do we get a movie? And it was like, what are you saying? Like, just, I get where she's coming from as a Hispanic. Like, it's like, yes, we want representation in the media, but it's not a competition. Like, it's like, it is specifically among minorities. And I think, and she's had some other controversial things come up where she's like said the N-word, but she's Hispanic. And so like PSA, it's not okay to say the N-word unless you're Black. Just putting that out there. But, and so I think as a person of color, that you, when you're not Black, you have to work through that, and you have to speak out in your communities. Those are all just like very important things, and educate people, because especially, well, now, so all of this really started, the anger for me, the anger that led to, I want to take action and I want to be a resource. I mean, obviously it started since like Black Lives Matter movement started, but recently now with the quarantine, Ahmaud Arbery. And it's like, I started seeing people posting about the run. And I'm like, okay, we're going on a run. Like, I get it. I get the sentiment, but what's going to happen after? Okay, so you can run these 2 miles. And it's just like, and then other people started getting shot that we heard about, or we started hearing about more cases. And it's just like, okay, so can you run for Brianna? No, she wasn't a runner. She wasn't running when she was killed. So it's just like, I get what people want to feel like they're doing something. Yeah. And I totally get that, because I want to feel like my action is going to have a direct consequence towards racial equality. But it doesn't work like that. Like, these are systemic issues. And so I think that, and I also, sorry, this is like a random rant, I have seen a lot of people want to post things on their story, and it's like, after a while, like speaking, so white silence specifically is worse, I think, than people that are speaking out against these issues, if that makes sense. So it's like, the cop was fine in this issue, that kind, like the opposite side of the argument. And it's interesting to me, because I see this stuff on social media where it's like, certain people that I follow are really silent up until everybody else has posted about it. And I get that. I understand. Again, I really try to be understanding here, because I'm like, you don't want to come off like uneducated, or it's like that idea of like, well, I want to hear the officer's side of the story first. And it's like, what do you need to hear? Like, a person was murdered. Like, what's the argument here? Anyways, but it's like that idea of people want to wait, or they want to post, I can't really think of a term other than like whitewashed material. And so there was a post going around where it was like, if you don't change it here, it's not going to change here. Or if you don't change it here and you don't address it here, it's not going to change here.
Right.
And
the heart, the house.
Yeah, yes. And so, I think her Instagram handle is Oh Happy Danny. She posts really amazing things, and she's really using her talents to like portray a lot of the things that are happening right now, like with graphics. But she's posted a lot of other things that nobody else posted. And I'm like, this is like the most, it's like talking about race, but it's not talking about race. So I saw a lot of people that I follow posted. And I was like, I don't think this is helping anyone you follow. And I think that that's going back to like that idea of social media. Like, I want my social media to challenge people. I want not, and I really do like I'm not an artist, so I don't really post things that are like that, but I do try to find things that I think that have challenged me and that I think will challenge others, because I think that that's when you feel uncomfortable, you choose to either ignore it or try to find the ground there that's going to make you feel comfortable again. And that can only happen through conversation. And even then, you're still probably going to feel uncomfortable when it comes to race.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've got it. So you've been saying so many good things. So I'm gonna give you a little. No, it's been awesome. I'm gonna give you a little breath break. And I want to circle back to some of the things you've been talking about, because this is something I wanted to get into today. Because there's a conversation around not just the tragedies, the murders, the lynchings that have happened, this sort of stream of lynchings, and of course you mentioned Ahmaud Arbery, and then Breonna, and now George Floyd.
Yeah.
So we're in the thick of all that right now. There's been protests at this point in multiple cities. Some have started. There have been fires and violence, and I'm not going to come down on anything here, because there's still a lot of media coming in about what's happening.
Yeah.
I really more so want to talk about just how we got here with all of this,
Yeah.
and specifically social media activism, because this has been something I've been really reflecting on. I've got a real I've always had this idea that discussions that have been gotten into over social media about really sensitive issues tend to go very poorly,
Mm-hmm.
right? In terms
Yeah.
of productivity. Like I feel like the way, and of course we have a lot of data to back this up now, the way we engage on technology when we're talking to someone behind a screen, it changes, it alters the way we do communication.
Yes.
And so on the one sense, it's like for me, there's a line of addressing and speaking on certain issues through a social media platform, but not necessarily wanting to start unproductive conversations
Mm-hmm.
through a social media platform. And like, you don't want to engage in white silence, but you also don't want to just say, well, everybody's posting about this, so I'm here. Oh, and here's my post as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
like I've been really encouraged. I've been really encouraged by the volume of posts specifically about this recent string of violent murders of unarmed Black people.
Yeah.
And in one sense, I'm like, I am encouraged. I'm encouraged by just the amount of people who are really saying unacceptable, not okay, this isn't good. But it has a shelf life, just like you were saying, like these 24 hours, and then
Yeah.
boom. And then I've seen some people that have been re-upping for every couple of days with new posts and things like that. But even then, it feels like such a very finite
Yeah.
place. And so it's almost like I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think
Yeah.
there's a place for social media activism because it does unite voices, it does bring together communities, it does allow people to have a sense of like who cares about these issues. Like,
Yeah.
social media is great for raising awareness. Like that's a
Yes.
huge piece, I think, for social media. But it's like, but then what?
Yeah.
But then what? And that's what I really want to talk about, because I feel like I like now this forum isn't much better than social media. It's like it's just one more step. But for me, having even just a live conversation is
Yeah.
just one more step. And then like for me, in person, like embodied justice work is the ultimate goal of all of this,
Yeah.
is the ultimate sort of boots on the ground work. But talking about like what those steps are, what those things are, what our recommendations are,
Yeah.
and why it's important
Yeah.
for us to stand in solidarity with our Black brothers and sisters, as white
Yeah.
and brown people. Because you're right about all the embedded racism. Like I, I am still educating myself. I will
Yeah.
never ever use the word woke to describe myself. It's never gonna happen.
That's,
That's
yeah, I can.
it's never gonna happen, because I feel like even though I've been on this journey for several years now, and I've been actively educating myself about racism, and have been using that education to then bring people together to have those same conversations about these issues, I feel like I'm still learning. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm, right. We're like, and just for clarity's sake, the book that you were citing, is that the book is called White Fragility? It's that.
No, so there is a book called White Fragility that I do
Okay.
recommend people read by Robin DiAngelo, but the one that I was quoting was Me and White Supremacy, and it's a 28-day journey, I want to say.
Yeah.
And it's by Layla F. Saad, and she actually lives in the Middle East, but she grew up in England. And I've learned so much from her. And so she came out with this book, which is just a challenge. And every day there's journaling prompts. And it's essentially, it's literally one of the most tangible ways that I have seen for people to work on their internal racism. And so some of the things don't actually apply to me, because so the way that when she wrote this book, she wrote it on behalf of Black, Indigenous people of color, so BIPOC, I think that's the way you say it. So it is really for white people, but again, like, I'm learning a lot, and I actually wanted to touch a little bit more on the internal racism, specifically in the Hispanic community, because that's all that I can like account for. But I was also going to say that another thing that I realized is uh, with regarding racism there, it's like that idea that, well, one, I'm not Black, so I will never understand Black pain. Right. And the history that is like rooted in this country for Black people is very different than for, say, like my immigrant family, because it's like we don't have a history here of lynchings and things like that. Obviously, immigrants for the most part have usually been hated, but I haven't experienced that. My ancestors are all in Uruguay, so it's like and that's something that I have addressed, and I hope that's helpful to someone, like in talking to my dad, because my dad, and I think a lot of Hispanics, are very much like pick yourself up by your bootstraps kind of people, because that's just how we were raised. I don't necessarily agree with that because of systemic like injustices, but I do think that, and I really try to be understanding. And I think that when you're trying to have conversations, you have to be able to address both sides, and like I don't know, Nico always tells me this, like my husband, that idea of like, you have to say, I hear you. Like this is me talking to my dad and my family. Like, I hear you, and I think that you are justified in everything that you believe, because it is a lot of, well, I faced racism too. Like I've had people mock my parents for their accent, and it's like, okay, yes, and that is so wrong. So addressing that first, and then being like, but also here's the way, like Black people are being murdered on the street, like day in and day out. And so it's like, how do we build a bridge? So being bridge builders versus like separating ourselves from each race. So I just wanted to address that because I had thought about that. And I think that that's also, I mean, I don't know if you have any Hispanic listeners, but I have gotten questions on like, how do you talk to your parents about this? Because they don't want to listen. And I'm like, my parent, thankfully, like we've developed conversation. It takes a while though, because some people don't have great relationships with their family members. And I think it took a while to get there, but it is really about like respect is the number one thing. I think respect and like already embracing the fact that you're probably not going to agree with everything, because there's also, not only is there like a race issue, but like also a generational issue too, because obviously if like with my parents, like they grew up with like specifically in Uruguay, like people like use the N-word to me in Uruguay, and so my mom grew up with that too, and so she's like, so that's like another layer to the conversation.
Wow, that is, wow, that's really interesting. And it's true. It's like, these are the complexities of it. And I love what you said about the art of conversation, basically the art of conversation and being able to have, because I think this is, if I could give, I know that especially in the Christian culture that I inhabit, I feel like there's a decent population of people who, they believe racism is wrong. They're really quite broken down by the terrible things they're seeing happening right now, of course, specifically to Black people. But this was also like when we were looking at racism, the recent racism against Asians and Asian Americans as a result of coronavirus stuff. Like a lot of this stuff, like they're affected by it. They see it. But they're also held back by a number of things, and some of those things result from they feel stupid in a way, like they feel like ignorant, like they're going to say the wrong thing, they're going to ask the wrong question. And I remember being there. I remember way back at the beginning of my journey having sort of the same trepidation about entering, and they're afraid they're going to like look like a white savior or have some of that. And then they've also got some questions because it's like, it's kind of like what you're talking about with like what we say and what we hear. So we say white privilege, and they hear, you're saying I didn't work hard for what I've got. Right. And so like, again, we see the dichotomy, and it's like, well, no, there's a way to bridge this, because it's not saying that people don't work hard. And I think this is particularly difficult for my white friends who are in blue collar arenas, because hard work is like you were saying, hard work is a very like precious value. And for
Yeah.
someone to say that they just, or for them to hear that someone is saying that they don't work hard and that they're, that they're like, oh, I don't feel privileged. Like
Yeah.
I'm living here, I'm doing this. Like, what are you saying? I'm privileged. So there's that bridge that needs to be gapped, like you were saying,
Yes.
and so I think for that reason, and for the reason you mentioned earlier about the fact that our Black friends and communities should not be our first and most focused resource for our education. Like
Yeah.
giving them, for all of those reasons combined, I really do believe that two critical first steps for folks who might be in this on the fence category is to educate yourself. And
Yeah.
I'm going to put all of the resources you mentioned and then some other ones in the show notes for this, so people can reference
Wonderful.
a couple of key places to start, just to educate yourself. There's so many great books and movies and podcasts and resources out
Yeah.
there. Like, you can learn so much. And I
Yes.
would say at this point, I've gotten to a place now where like 80% of what I've learned about well, not just Black people, but like any group in this country that's underserviced and often marginalized and oppressed, I've learned from actually reading or watching. And
Yes.
then the other 20% are conversations with people and getting like their stories and perspectives. But educating ourselves first, and then finding friends and spaces just like we're doing now, where you
Yes.
can have conversations where there's some grace to say the wrong
Mm-hmm.
thing. There's some grace to mess up. There's like a safe space
Yeah.
to address the problems in sort of a messy way, before you feel like I have to get it all right before I can come to this table. So start with addressing race with more people that look closer to you. And again, that's not to exclude people. It is really to say there is a good starting point where you can build
Yes.
that confidence and that tenderness.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think while you're learning, allowing yourself to be uncomfortable, because it's gonna take a lot of work, and it's almost like, well, like, to make it very metaphorical, like when you're working out and you feel like your muscles kind of tearing, it's that idea, but it's your brain. So because it's just like, it's, you have to unlearn so much. And I just, from what I used to say, I would say even as like a freshman in college to what I believe now, it's crazy. I've definitely transformed. And I used to be really scared about being outspoken about these things, but I realized, specifically at Berry College, where there's not a lot of people of color, that it's like, if I don't say something, like nobody will. And so yeah, so that's I think. And also, another tangible way that I will add is donating to grassroots organizations if you have the ability to, just because, and researching who you're donating to is so important. Like, don't, like, literally websites exist for everything. And so I would just be very careful in that, because I know, like, I wouldn't want money to fall into the wrong hands, especially like the money that people, like, you work hard for this money, you want it to go to the right people and to the right organization. So definitely researching. Something that I always do before we donate is that we go on the website and we look at the board of directors, and the staff, and look if there's diversity there. We also look up news articles to see if there hasn't been anything sketchy, like in the past, because I mean, that is one thing I'm so thankful for with the media, is that like you do find out things about organizations that you would have never known prior to that. So I encourage people, if they can, to donate. And just, and like you said, the free resources, there's so many things. Oh, that, and going off of that, if you're using somebody's Instagram stuff, like if you are, for example, Rachel Gargle, who I've mentioned, if you're using any of her resources, that she has a thing where you can PayPal her or Cash App or Venmo her like $10 or something, because it's like, these people take a lot of energy to write these things up. And also, stay out of Black people's DMs. That's like another thing. Do not, I know that we talked about this already, but now is not the time. If you're reaching out to a friend, I do think that reaching out to people is helpful in the sense of like, you can start the message by saying, don't feel like you need to respond to this. Just want to let you know I love you and I'm here for you if you need anything.
Absolutely.
That goes a long way. Don't ever be like, hey, so sorry you're going through this. Do you have anything that I could be doing right now for you? And it's like, it's kind of like when somebody's grieving, like it's the idea of like saying, let me know if I can do anything for you.
Yeah. Because that goes back to us not wanting to do the wrong thing, but in doing so, I don't think we realize we put the onus of responsibility on that person
Yes,
to then
yes,
have to come up with that. And when you're enduring trauma, that's a part of you that shuts down as a
exactly.
protective part. Like there's a cognitive response, which is often why when people are grieving or hurting or going through trauma, they can't tell us what they need. But again, there are resources about
Exactly.
trauma that help us be able to come into those situations and have a better understanding of what is helpful and what is not.
Yeah. And it's like if we're exhausted, like I'm so tired with all of this going on, I can't even imagine what Black people are feeling. And so it's like that idea of like if you're tired of seeing it, imagine how tired they are of living it. So like with social media stuff. And so I think, yeah.
No, I'm there. I think one of my big things for this run of lynchings that have happened is if you are a non-Black person, reach out to your Black friends and say, I'm here for you. I'm
Exactly.
here to listen. I am a safe, judgment-free space. You can be angry, you can vent. My heart is broken. I love you. I can't imagine what you're feeling right now.
Exactly.
I just want you to know, talk to people who are filling you up and know that I'm one of those people if you need me.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
like just yeah, just that's I mean, we use the word solidarity a lot. And there's multiple layers to that, but I feel like in moments like this, like education is a separate endeavor
Mm-hmm.
that'll be very taxing for the person who's doing it and the educator, unless that educator is just like a just a source like a book
Yeah.
or a movie. But being able to just say, I'm here for you, no judgment, I will listen to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. And I think this is one last thing about also social media etiquette that I just, because I had written some things down on my notes, but making sure that we don't make the post about us. So I have noticed some things on social media where white women who have Black kids have made the post about them. And first of all, again, it goes to the intention. There's no malintent there, but the narrative is not about you right now. And so I think that it's really important to be careful because we get that you're hurting for your Black son, but again, like it's about him, not about you. And so I think that that's really important because we've also, and this is, we might have to cut this out, but I have noticed that um, there's been like a post going around where it's like, I am not Black, but I see you. I'm not Black, but I'm hurting with you. Again, it's starting with I.
Mm.
And it's like, yes, we know you're not Black. Like, we don't have to address that. And so I think, and I have seen a few things on Twitter with specifically like Black people that I follow have been like, what the heck does that mean? Like, I'm not Black, but okay. And I think that that can be, again, it's like you're starting the sentence with me, but love you. So I think, I don't know, we might cut that out, but
Well, and here's something I think I'm going to keep it in because I think this is a teaching moment for everyone, which is this is where I think it's like these are lessons we need to learn. These are the subtle things that creep into our narrative, that creep into our understanding, that come from our worldview, that need course correction, right? Like
mm-hmm.
it's because you're saying that about a response to racism, and so it makes people go, oh, I've said the wrong thing again.
Yeah.
But it would be the same even in a situation where a friend was dealing with a breakup.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually that same level of advice where you don't just kind of hijack the conversation and make it about you. And that's something that's much that's that's sort of an easier thing to kind of talk about, is ways to understand how we engage in conversation, because we're in kind of a culture that has taught us to be very introspective and not be empathetic. We don't tend to sit there and think, oh, what is happening to you? How can I be here for you? A lot of times we're grasping, and the only thing we have is to say, well, and we just sort of spill that out.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, this is a practice that we would do in any similar situation. The fact that we're saying it about the response to racism makes people just kind of, I think oftentimes I crawl back in their shell and say, well, I guess I'm
Mm-hmm.
not getting it right again. But no. I want to encourage people. That's not the point of saying that. The point is that these sort of things are so deeply embedded in us that we've got to put in the work. We've
Yeah.
got to put in the work to recognize this about ourselves. Because even when I began to realize my own racism and began to see outrage at it, I made a ton of mistakes.
Yeah.
I made a ton of mistakes. Now that doesn't excuse them, but it
Mm-hmm.
just does say that there is a learning process. And these conversations are for that. These
Yeah.
conversations are for that, because I know it's like we look at the people posting that and we say, I see you want to help.
Mm-hmm.
Let's break this open a little bit and be even more helpful, because
Yeah.
that's less helpful, and that's not a condemnation as much as it is a way to say, we don't see this, so use this, be better. Because I know that for myself and a lot of the people I know, they're going to take advice like that and say, okay, noted, I want to be
Yeah.
better. I
Okay,
can
good.
switch the pronouns. Yeah, no. And I think that's a moment, because it's like you point it out, you say it, you see it, you call it, you put it on the table, and then we say, okay, don't shrink back, lean in,
Yeah.
use it,
Yeah.
because we don't want to be racist. We want to fight racism,
Right.
but we often just get really like you said, really uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and we go for that level of comfort. We try to zip to those zones as quickly as possible, which creates that defensiveness, which is ding ding white fragility. And
Yes.
and
Yes.
we come
Amen.
right back to it. But that's
Yeah.
okay. I think we need to speak truth into those patterns,
Yeah.
because again, the person who's experienced that pattern probably doesn't realize they're experiencing it, just like I didn't for a long time. And then when they do, instead of saying, oh, I guess I've got it wrong, like, no, you don't want to be racist, that's great,
Yeah.
push forward, keep pushing
Yes.
forward, because and this is where I think as Christians we have a great opportunity, because we have an entire ethos of grace,
Mm.
where we say,
Amen. Yeah.
your mistakes, we get it, you want to be helpful, you're here, like if you're willing to learn and be kind of have some of these subtle things broken down, and have that good surgery done on your heart,
Yeah.
then you start off making a lot of mistakes, and it'll be okay, because you will get better at this, and you will become
Yes.
more helpful.
Completely agree. Yeah. And I think it is hard in Christian circles sometimes to talk about these things. I think that when it comes, like it is that idea of like transforming our hearts, and I think people are frustrated with Christianity because it's like we are so focused on like, well, like that heart transformation, that sometimes there's no actionable steps that are taken, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard for me to like explain, but I did see something recently that I was reading up on, and it was like that idea that we're like, well, we have to pray, and there's so much power in prayer, but it's also like people need to see the tangible work
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. And um I think it's important for both, and Jesus did both. He prayed, and he was also like, what up, I'm here calling you out.
Absolutely. Oh yeah,
So
absolutely. And so it's like, again, it's like we like not just social media activism, not just prayers, not just
yes.
behind the scenes tangible work, but like both, and not either or. These things are not in competition with each other. It is just like, this has its limits. This has, it's like these
Mm-hmm.
things in and of themselves have merit. Use as many of them, and just to the point that they are helpful and
Yeah.
valuable in the
Amen.
situation. And again, I think like if we all get sensitive topics like race or gender issues or anything, and I sort of dive into a lot of these things, they become difficult to talk about because of the the cultural tension that surrounds them. So it's like we immediately enter into this cloud of tension, and we're
Yes.
already acting in ways that are
Yes.
contrary to ourselves in a more safe and relaxed state. So what I'd
Yeah.
love to do is call people out of that tension and say, we can talk about this
Yeah.
in a way that is good and helpful. And why don't we start like I'm a Caucasian woman, safe space. Let's come talk about this, and let's do it in a way to where we can actually benefit and be
Yes.
better.
Yes. Yes.
And then we go out and we continue to engage and stand with and be in community with friends that are much different than us, which, you know, these are stages and steps, but it's like, we can do this. We can do this. We just have to recognize there's tension that surrounds this implicitly.
Yes. Yeah.
And we don't necessarily need that tension to drive the way that we discuss these things, which is why I like a lot of these things happening off social media rather than
Yeah.
on social
No,
media.
for sure.
But you have to seek those out. You have to seek out mentors. You have to seek out community. You have to seek out, and social media is a great place to start, because you see people posting and you're like, maybe I could talk to them.
Yes. And I was going to touch on that too. So something I've been challenging myself to do lately is not to unfriend or unfollow people I disagree with. That's not an approach for everyone. So I want to put that out there. That does not mean you need to do that, because sometimes you have to create boundaries, and you have to, and
Right.
it's hard. And two things. One, if you're going to post a video of somebody being murdered, you should put a trigger warning before it, because
Definitely.
so I went to say that earlier when we were talking about social media stuff. Two, I have to challenge myself, because I need to see what other people are thinking. That's not for everyone, and it is exhausting. So I get it. But also, social media is not the best place to always engage in conversation. It's like you just said, because it's like when the comment section is it's just not, because again, you hide behind the screen, and it's like you say things that you would never say in person.
Right.
And I've made the mistake of engaging with people, and I'm just like, this is a waste of time. Like, it just is. You are going to say what you say. You're going to Google your facts and your statistics, and I'm going to do the same. And it's so that is the time where, like you said, off social media. So just encouraging people in that. But sometimes you do got to unfriend the people, because it can be unhealthy. Like, sometimes when you want social media to be a release, and you're like going on there and seeing people post racist things or things that are just horrible, it's like, well, you should, yeah. So a balance there, something that I'm just challenging myself with right now, because I want to see what other people actually do think. And it's so easy to paint the good and bad picture with people, but it is the lines are blurry, and yeah.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. And I would challenge my white friends to stay engaged with differing opinions,
Yeah.
because we don't have nearly as much skin in the game. Like, we're not having to think about generational trauma. We're not having there's not as much that we're having to deal
Yes.
with in order to engage with differing opinions. So let's do it. Like, let's leverage the privilege of not having that
Exactly.
into being
Exactly.
able to be present in spaces while giving oh gosh, our marginalized brothers and sisters opportunities to hit the relief valve on
Yeah.
that, and have grace for what they're seeing. So so it feels like, wow, these are kind of like different rules for different people, and isn't that in and of itself like a division? It's like I don't know if because I can already hear like the stuff in my head of be like, well, what about this? But I want to
Yes.
say that when we're talking about race and things with people, I don't think we should be reductionistic about like nickel and dime equality. I think we start with people as people, and understanding where they're coming from, knowing that there will be differences, and differences does not mean that we're suddenly claiming that inequality is a good thing. It is about just learning
Yeah.
history, learning differences, learning about different experiences. You've shared about your own experiences and your family's experiences that are unique and different. Me recognizing that difference, again, doesn't come down to nickel and diming inequality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, I hear you.
it's just carving out space to learn, and to sit with that, sit with that
Yeah.
before we speak into it or say anything. So I just want to encourage people that, yeah, that's not an argument for or against. It's not even worth really addressing. Like we should understand that leveraging privilege for the other, leveraging privilege to love our neighbors,
Mm-hmm.
leveraging privilege in the way that Jesus did when it talks about in Philippians 2 that he made himself nothing and became obedient unto death, even death on a cross, is leveraging privilege and saying, I have this power and I give it up
Wow, that's a
for
good,
the other through love, and that going after that because of Christ and asking God to show us where that works in our lives. I think it's a powerful turning point, and it's humbling and it's hard, but that's why Jesus went first. And why he said no greater love. Like that's big words. No greater love than someone lay down their life for his friend, and then he did it. We're looking to love our neighbor. We're looking to help our friends. And Philippians 2 says this was a leveraging of privilege, self-sacrifice. That's what it was. And I say, okay, that's a place where we can start.
I really like that.
Well, Giuliana, I think we could probably talk about this subject
I know.
10 times over. Before we wrap it up, though, I wanted to touch on one more thing, and that is just because recently, so I kind of did a part 1 talking about the ethical complexities that are coming up as a result of coronavirus and quarantine.
Yes.
And I referenced a post that actually originated.
Yes, I saw that
with you about from was it conscientious kid? Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's just is it just conscious kid?
Conscious
it might just
kid.
be yes, conscious kid. Yes,
conscious kid. And I was like, I know I'm saying that wrong. And that picture in the article. And I just wanted to, because right now, of course, the lynchings are the biggest thing on the shelf that are worth addressing because they're on the hearts and minds of people. But also just we are learning some stuff, aren't we? Like we're learning that loving our neighbor is as simple and as difficult as anything, because you've got these counterweights of health issues and also economic issues. And the longer we stay in quarantine, the longer there are just whole groups of people that are going to struggle economically as a result of that. But it is a horrible choice if you're in a place where you don't have good healthcare coverage. You might be living in multi-generational homes with vulnerable or immune compromised people, and you're having to choose between, do I expose myself to the potential of getting this virus from people who are now sort of thinking, oh, we're good and everything's great, let's just go out and be like normal, or I've become bankrupt because I'm not working. I know this is something you've been wrestling with. I know this is something you've been researching. So I'm just wondering, can I just get some thoughts from you on this?
Yeah. And I think so Nico and I talk about this pretty much every day because it's heartbreaking, because the fact that we reopened already is crazy, because it's like, and I get it, I understand, that's the thing, it's such a multi-layered issue. I think number 1, everyone should wear a mask. That is like, it's just simple. It sucks. We were at Target yesterday because we needed to get some things, and I was suffocating in my mask because I was like running around trying to get through it quickly. But it's like, if that's literally the least I can do to prevent somebody else from getting sick, then I'm gonna do it. And I think it speaks on privilege when people don't wear masks, because it's like you feel like, because the idea of the mask is, I'm not getting someone else sick, so, or I'm trying to prevent from getting someone else sick. And so I think Nico was telling me, so please do not quote me on this, he he read an article that it said like, if everyone wore a mask, we'd be down to like 1% or something like that. I don't know of what, but it made sense when he said it. And so he's
a smart guy.
He's a smart guy. So, but it is just, that is like the one thing that we can do. I get it, because it's like, we saw that picture that we were referencing of the nail salon, and it's like, if you're going to be doing those things, the least you can do is wear a mask. And if you're going to go to the salon because people need money, like, I would say the most tangible way is to pay people ahead of time, and say, hey, in a few months, maybe, which I know a lot of people were doing before. So like buying gift cards to places, all of these like tangible ways. But I think that it's like our duty to try to prevent the virus. And so I know that people are tired of staying home. Like, I get it. I'm exhausted, and you want to see people, but it is selfish to keep on going as if nothing's happened. And so it's like, when you're going to a place, have a mask. Another resource, tandemquiltingco.com, they hire refugee women to make quilts, but now they're switching over to making masks. You can get like 5 masks. I don't remember the price we paid, but just have different masks, wash your masks. Those are like simple things that you can do. I'm not a medical professional, but I would say that's literally the most tangible thing. Maybe don't, like, I've seen a lot of people like do the patio seating at restaurants. You can't really wear a mask while you're eating, and that's like another difficult thing.
Yeah.
But it sucks because it's like, these people need the money. So again, it's like, if you have the ability to pay people, just tip heavily on your takeout order. That's what we do, and when we can. I don't have a lot of answers. We try to stay home, and we wear masks whenever we go out, and we sanitize, and we try not, be respectful, because it's easy to get frustrated with people that are working right now, essential workers, but it's like, it's not their fault that things are out of stock, and they're doing their best. They're also probably tired of wearing masks too. Like, we see people sometimes at the grocery store that work there that have their masks down, and it's like, it's hard. Like, they're working. Yeah, it's so hard, because again, it's that idea of giving grace. Like, you want to give them grace. They're literally here working like 8 hours at Publix, like,
and wearing a mask for that long.
Yeah, it's just not. Yeah, so I think having grace, but stay home when you can, and it's not over yet. So
yeah, that's I appreciate that, and I agree. This has been something I've really been wrestling with, because loving my neighbor by trying to keep them from getting a terrible disease, loving my neighbor by making sure that some of the most economically vulnerable people don't suffer during this time. And having to calculate that. I think as Christians, if our central motivation is those commandments that God gives us to love God and love neighbor, and of course loving neighbor as we love ourselves. So like we first like understand our own effort in self-care, and then provide that for our neighbor. But if those are our motivations and our orientations, then we have some hard decisions to make. It's not so cut and dry as much. And I love the way you articulate. It's like, this is what we do. This is how we're doing it. We're trying to take responsibility for ourselves, and then do the best we can with everything else. And I think during this time, there's no script, right? There's no script for this. And as Christians, I want to extend some grace to everyone who's wrestling with this, but also saying, I think this is a time when we have to devote our prayer lives to saying, Lord, how do I do this? How do I love my neighbor well? How do you call me into a place to be who you have created me to be in the midst of this? Because otherwise, I just don't know how we do it. I don't know how we qualify all the different variables that go in that are affecting people, specifically the most vulnerable in our society.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm going to add too, check on your single friends and check on the people that live by themselves, because something that we did with a friend of ours is we just bought flowers and some chocolate and some other things and just dropped it off at the door, and then like left. And that was like, I know that was so helpful to her, to one of our friends. And it's really simple things like that those are like, again, tangible ways to be there for people, because things are lonely right now, and loving your neighbor sometimes looks like that, and going out of your way and surprising people. And you have to find creative ways to love people, and now's the time. Smile at people under your mask, like let them know that you see them, because these are hard times. but it's that idea of like, we have to go out of our way to be as kind as we can be right now, because again, everyone is doing their best. And some people are just going to be selfish and they're going to live in their privilege and not wear a mask, and they're going to be like, whatever. And I think people aren't taking this seriously because the people around them aren't getting sick.
Right.
And they're not seeing it, and they don't believe the news. And I'm like, sometimes it's just like, you got to see it to believe it. And I think we would be better off if we just don't see it.
Yeah,
So
no, I agree. I think for a lot of folks who are pushing back against the realities of the virus, there's a lack of proximity to folks who have really been affected by the virus. And to be fair, that would create a different perspective,
yeah,
and cause people to make calculated risks on a whole different level.
yeah,
I haven't had anyone close to me get sick, but
yeah.
there was a friend of a friend that contracted the virus. He survived
Mm.
it, but it
Oh my
attacked
gosh.
every organ in his body,
Mm.
and he's still having trouble walking and speaking.
Yeah,
And I, even though that wasn't somebody I knew terribly well, the stories that I heard about his progress, and we were all praying for him, and just now knowing just what he's dealing with, I'm like, okay, that is
yeah,
wrenching, and I'm gonna try to take this as seriously as possible. But I think that was a pivotal moment for me, and it does shift. So I feel like there's a spectrum that a lot of us are on, which is, again, our Christian ethic helps us push through that, because I don't necessarily have to be proximate to somebody sick
yeah,
to prioritize loving my neighbor, because it's something Jesus told us was like one of the most important things to do.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like, I don't have to lean back just into my own reasoning and
yeah,
perspective, and the limits that I exhibit into who's around me. And again, that's what I would call all Christians too. For those of you who claim to be believers, think about that first,
hmm,
instead of just trying to fall back first and foremost on what you're seeing and experiencing,
yeah,
because there's obviously, we don't know what we don't know.
yeah,
And that's why Christ gives us these lovely modes, which
yeah,
is why it is
yeah,
both simple and complex and difficult.
yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate you just tackling that with me, because
It's hard.
these are the good conversations we have to have right now
Yeah,
about this.
I think it's hard too because people get offended, and that is so hard because it's like, there's so many people that we want to see, and it's like, it's hard to be like, I'm sorry, I don't feel safe. Like, we don't want, and it's like, people do take it personally, and that's difficult for us because it's like, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but it's like, it's not over, and we can't just pretend it is. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
No. Well, Giuliana, I really appreciate you coming on and having these conversations with me
yes.
on this Sunday morning. I always end the guest segments with a thing called "You've Just Got to Try It," and I have this theory, because I hear this all the time. I think everybody's got their things where they're like, oh, and it could be like a movie or a genre of music, or just like, like a product, anything. But everyone's got their thing where it's like, I am the salesman of this
Oh,
idea or this thing, and I'm just gonna pitch it because people just gotta try it. So it's
yes.
it's just
Oh.
fun. I love it. I know you probably got a dozen things, but what would be top for this one?
I would say, very unrelated to anything we've talked
Yeah,
about today, but
go for it.
Cocokind is my favorite skincare line. I literally, Nico uses it now, which is crazy. He's never used anything on his skin in his entire life. So that's another topic for another time. They are just an amazing company, clean ingredient, affordable, environmentally friendly, spoken out about issues, and women owned. So check them out, cocokind.com. Their Instagram's amazing. I could talk about them for a long time, and they changed my skin. It's great. So everybody check it out.
Cocokind.
That's
All
yeah.
right. I love it. I absolutely love it. I know you are on your way to being a Instagram influencer for sure. I feel it. I feel it coming. But Giuliana, I love what you're doing. I love the way you're living your life, and thinking so intentionally about how you live it and how you invite people into it. So just thank you for being you and doing the awesome things
Thank
that you do.
you. Back
And
at you.
coming on and just talking through all this crazy stuff with me.
Yeah.
But you've been awesome, and we'll have you back when we can talk about anything, any other thing that
Yes.
you love that floats our boat. But appreciate you. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah.
Ooh, you guys, that was a lot of hard-hitting stuff. I hope that there were things that enriched you, things that challenged you. We want to keep this conversation going. I'm hoping to have more people on this podcast. I feel like this is a moment in history where we can really have some good, productive conversations. But please go to the show notes. I would also like to, one of the things in there that I would like to highly recommend personally is Be the Bridge, Latasha Morrison. She's local to us here in Atlanta, and they have curriculums for a number of settings that are Christian based for these very conversations about race. And if you are a white person kind of taking some of those first steps, there's a curriculum where you can get together with your other white friends and begin to educate yourselves before going out into the public sphere. And it's just a great way to actually get started and to push through those things that are holding us back. So I just really deeply encourage you, and I encourage your thoughts, and I encourage your honest questions. This is not easy, and it can be really difficult, but we're here. We're here because we really truly believe that God has called us to be people of shalom, that He's given us a ministry of reconciliation, and that there's work to do as Christians. So I appreciate you sticking it out with me today. Thank you for coming by, and now we go out to love God and neighbor. We'll see you next time.